Hello and welcome y'all to another Sales Hacker webinar. Super excited for this one. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to build the ultimate sales forecasting approach for predictable revenue. You know, as sales leaders and individual contributors, that's what we're all in the business of, right? Is creating that predictable revenue streams for our respective organizations. And all of that really hinges on your ability to accurately forecast. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. And I've definitely got the right guest to do it with me. But before I introduce my guest, just super quick housekeeping items. So number one, if you've ever joined a Sales Hacker webinar, we do these things for the community. So if you have any burning questions about forecasting, please do let us know. There's a little Q&A section at the bottom. Jump on and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can. If they're relevant throughout, we've got a little bit of time carved out at the end for some Q&A as well. I actually had some people hit me up already with some good questions, so thank you for that. And then number two is all of these are recorded. So we actually have a YouTube channel you can go to, and we send them out about 24 hours after we wrap up. So without fail, I always get a few emails being like, where's recording, where's recording, where's recording? Do not worry, it'll be in your box in 24 hours. But yeah, that's the non-fun stuff out of the way. I want to introduce my awesome guest. I'm very excited to be joined today by Kevin McKeown, who is the SVP of New Business Sales at Cision. Kevin, welcome to the community, man.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Definitely looking forward to this one. And we've been doing some planning on this webinar, and you've held various sales leadership roles, really cool companies like Spiceworks, TrendKite, and today you're managing the new business team at Cision. But I always like to, hear it from you, a little bit more color on your background and maybe something fun for the audience to know about you.
Sure, absolutely. So I was originally an engineer. I studied computer electrical engineering at Purdue, so I was a geek, came out as a programmer, and started my career in the consulting world doing consulting services, and pretty quickly learned that I had a flavor for the sales side of it. Within a year of being out of school, I actually sold my first sort of consulting upsell agreement and realized I had a flair for selling, so that's kind of how it all got started. But I spent a good amount of time in that role following the salespeople, supporting them, answering all their technical questions, sort of like an SE, and quickly realized I was a better salesperson than most of them. And that's sort of how I got my flair for going into the sales world. But been fortunate. I moved to Austin a few years out of college and have been fortunate enough to be part of several early stage companies here that have started at zero and worked their way up to 70+ million in revenue. First one was a company called Motive, which was enterprise software for the telcos. We took it public and sold it. And then I went on to help start a company called Spiceworks, which is digital media for the IT pro. I spent about 9 years there, growing it from about zero to a little over 70 million. And then was fortunate enough to get connected with the TrendKite team just over 2 years ago, and was part of the run up to just about 30 million before we were acquired by Cision in January. So now I am part of the Cision team, and I run the Austin. We have multiple offices, but I'm based in the Austin office. And I run all the U.S. new biz sales. So we have a pretty large team, and it's fun to be part of a big organization again after doing a few startups. So, and then some fun things about me: passionate runner, like to run on my free time to help work off the stress of this job, and then love to cook and love cooking and red wine. It's kind of my passions outside of work. So.
I love it. I love it. So you're that dual threat. I think we've seen this rise, and I see it more and more. People that I talk to is this engineer turned sales, which is like the Mark Roberge kind of combo. I think he was like one of the first ones to like come out and do some of that. I know our friends, consultants over at Dogpatch Advisors, ex-Google engineers, they've gone into sales, and it's pretty crazy because you can apply this other level of thinking to a lot of the sales approach, and as sales becomes more data driven, I think it just benefits everyone. So that's really cool. And What's your favorite red wine right now? What do you
gosh. Loaded question. I have too many, unfortunately, which is a bad problem. Couldn't even name one. It's a bad. My wife gives me shit about how much gives me grief about how much wine I drink. So,
Nice.
but not a lot of them.
That's awesome. Well, I was in Napa Valley. I took my girlfriend to Napa Valley 2 weeks ago, and we went to Camus Winery. So any wine people out there, Camus is on the top of my list right now.
One of my favorites, unfortunately, way out of the regular drinking budget.
Yes, for sure. Especially if you're a regular, that's for sure. Anyway, let's get back to forecasting. And I think the best place to kick it off is just setting the stage. Why are we talking about this today? And more importantly, let's start with what's wrong with our forecasting approach today. And I guess through your experience, can you tell me a little bit about when and why you decided to make a change in your forecasting?
Yeah, so every sales environment I've worked in, this has always been something that's troubled us. And you're always at the end of the month sitting there in front of CFO or COO, whoever's caring about the number, and they're asking you for this estimate of where you think you're going to land, 4 days left in the month or 4 days left in the quarter. And you're always sort of scrambling with spreadsheets and calculators and slacking people and trying to figure out where you really think you're going to land. And inevitably you end up with this margin of error that's usually bigger than you want it to be. And when it's negative or below goal, you're constantly having to defend and make explanations for why it didn't happen, right? And I just get tired, frankly, of all the post-mortem of end of month, end of quarter, trying to rationalize things. I'd rather be predictive and A, be as accurate as possible, B, but more than anything, be able to tell them why we think deals may or may not happen ahead of time so that you save yourself that pain. And frankly, it just should be easy. You should be able to roll up your forecast quickly and relatively accurately so that you don't have to spend so much time doing spreadsheets for the executive level. It's like your time is better spent with the staff, helping them get the deals in, helping them sell, than running numbers for the executive staff, right? So part of it comes from my passion of loving to sell and hating to do all of the busy work of reporting, which is, the bane of our existence in this job.
Yeah. So what percentage of your job, maybe let's talk before you kind of changed and made iterations to your forecast. How much of your time was spent in spreadsheets trying to track down numbers and accurately forecast? Could you put a percentage on that?
Probably 35%. I mean, a third of your day. I mean, really depends on the nature of your executive staff and how much of a, operational heavy or sort of operational overlord they are. I've had the luck, if you will, of working for very operational heavy executive teams. So they're constantly looking for updates like every other day, every third day, if not every day. End of the month, end of the quarter, it's a couple hours a day. Every couple hours they want an update. So, you get to that point where you feel like you're always answering the same question over and over. And you figure out there's got to be a better way to operationalize this to make it a push of a button versus a mental exercise every 2 hours or every 2 days.
Yeah, no doubt. And before we dive a little bit further, I think it might be helpful for me anyway, as we kind of frame this conversation. I want to do a super quick poll just to see who's joining us. And we had well over 500 people register for this one. So I would love to know, what's your current role? Are you an individual contributor? Are you a manager, or are you director level and above? And let's see, take about 5 seconds here.
How many people can you see on the line right now?
Let me see. We've got about 100 with us today joining.
Awesome.
Okay. Interesting. So we got a fairly even split here. So great representation from director level and above. We have 29%, so that makes sense given the topic. Manager is 27%, and then individual contributors is at 44%. So a pretty healthy mix, and it makes sense with the topic.
Cool.
But yeah, hopefully that helps us kind of talk through in that way.
Excellent.
Cool. Let's move on here. All right.
Excellent. So this is a pretty weird visual, but it was one that I pulled out just to sort of represent what I think about in my mind with when you see the sales forecasting meeting on your calendar. You've probably all sat in this room or a room like this with every rep around the table and the manager, the director, the VP, whomever's in charge. Although, most of the ones I sit in, there's a lot of laptops and a lot of phones as opposed to pieces of paper. But you get the idea. Everyone gathered around the table, and then in the incarnations of these I've seen, which frustrate me, is they go around the room person by person, and each person rattles off their set of accounts and the status and every little minute detail that you don't care about, while the rest of the room sits there, with their phone in their face, texting their friend, or on Slack, making fun of the person who's presenting for being way behind their number, whatever the case, right? But it's the most inefficient thing ever. And having the benefit of working in small companies that have grown to big companies, when you're 5 or 10 people, you can do this great. Everyone get in the room, pull up a Google Sheet or a spreadsheet and hash it out, talk about deals, and it's productive and helpful for everybody. But when you get like 10 or more people and you start to grow the team and you have multiple sales teams, this format becomes frankly counterproductive, and people are frustrated by it. But the symptom I see is so many times sales teams forget that they have to break away from this style, and they'll keep running these massive forecast meetings with everyone in the room for an hour. We have the team I run right now is well over 100 sellers, and we have a rule like the all hands that we do is 15 minutes, and it's kind of a quick roll up. But you want to get out of these types of formats where people are sitting around a table for an hour at a time, banging their head against the table because they're not getting anything out of value out of it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is unbelievably common still, even with massive organizations, even with the likes of like Zoom and stuff. I find people will try and mirror this format, even in a digital realm, and still make everyone, even if they're remote, log into Zoom and have that hour. So I always thought there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and then obviously you probably have all seen some type of a sheet that looks like this. This is one from a couple of years ago when we were smaller, but basically it's, a roll up, and most commonly what you see with these is it's data that's being pulled out of Salesforce and replicated into a spreadsheet. And generally what I find with these things is 5 minutes after the sheet's been updated and sent to, the CFO or whomever wants it, it's already 3 things have already changed because emails came in, red lines came back, agreement signed. So you spend all this time chasing these spreadsheets, keeping them updated when in fact they can't be ever accurate because they're always stale 5 minutes after you finish them. And the biggest thing with these is the only value they provide is the people that don't know the day-to-day deals, which is the senior leadership. Yeah. Those of us that are in the pits, the VPs, the directors, the managers that are working the deals, we have this, fingerprinted in our brain. We know these things. It's good to have it rolled up somewhere. But for the most part, this is an exercise to fulfill the curiosity of everybody else. It really doesn't provide a lot of material value to us as leaders and sellers as to where we should spend our time, right? It's really serving the needs of others, which is frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you think of a VP of sales or a director or even a sales manager and the price tag that comes with those roles. And when you're asking them simply just to synthesize information, it's not a productive use of anyone's time at all.
No, not at all. So, the other big part of sales forecasting, which is frustrating mostly for the sellers, as the manager, director, VP, whatever title you are, you spend most of your day going around trying to keep this spreadsheet accurate. So you do what I call the interrogation of the reps, right? Which can be any of these questions on the left. How was your last demo? Where are the red lines? Where are you on the deal? I'm sure if you're a seller, you've had these questions posed to you multiple times a day throughout every opportunity in your book. Or if you're doing more traditional methodology with something like BANT or MEDIC, you're getting BANTed or MEDICed on your ops. And it's this recurring approach where they, check in on every deal in your pipeline so that they can then go back and fill that spreadsheet in, right? And it's just, it's painful for the individual contributor, and it's very sort of redundant for the manager. It gets kind of painful at a point of just asking it over and over. Ideally, you wouldn't have to ask these questions. You would have an ability to see from a systematic perspective where those ops are and go in and ask where they need help versus go in and just ask the 10 questions of every op every day and drive the poor person nuts, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. With increased visibility, you get this opportunity to be more proactive versus just reactive when you're just, asking these questions, hoping for the right answer. If not, then you got to go in panic mode and try and find the best solution.
And this gets really precipitated at month end, right? Where the VP's stressed, the director's stressed. So you start to see flyby or drive-bys happen for the rep that has the biggest amount of deals, or any of the reps that have deals that are going to impact the quarter or the month. The manager comes by, then the director flies by, then the VP flies by, and they're like, I just told him the same answers. Why don't you talk to him, right? And the poor rep's just getting all these questions for no reason. And at the end of the day, this should all be something that the management team should be able to click and get if they've got the right system set up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that I've seen in pretty much every sales organization I work in is the notion of a probability weighted pipeline. So if you visualize that spreadsheet 2 slides back, they will itemize out, every deal that's in play by stage. They'll then apply a probability to it based on the stage it's at. So it's using this spreadsheet, but and then come up with what's called a weighted pipeline, right? And it's the classic deal value times its probability gives you the amount of that deal you're going to include in the forecast. It's somewhat tried and true. It's been used by a lot of people over time. It's reasonably accurate to a certain degree, but the problem with this approach I found is that it fails on a couple of fronts, and one of those is rep level variability. Some reps will tell you great things, others will tell you the wrong things, and then seasonality. I don't know about many of you, but we just finished July, and for us, summer in July is a really rough month. It's really slow between vacations for our staff, vacations for our customers, and every year July is just a hustle, and it's really frustrating month. So these probability-based models tend to not account for seasonality or rep variability, and that's generally when these fail you. And having worked in multiple seasonal businesses, this has always been a downfall of this type of approach. So it's driven me away from this approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you say rep variability, you're talking about, rep A might have a different version of what a 75% likely deal is to close versus rep B, who weights it at 75, but they're maybe more of a sandbagger or, someone has happy years.
I mean, that's a great lead into the next slide, right? So having been in this for a long time, I have found there are 3 breeds of salespeople. You have the sandbagger, and generally what the sandbagger's personality is, they believe that if they call a deal as coming in, they've essentially sabotaged that deal. So they will not put that deal on the forecast until literally they either were asked for the DocuSign or they see the actual signed contract. So this is the rep that has nothing in the pipeline and then closes out at 120% with 3 deals that come surprisingly in at the last day of the quarter or last day of the month, right? Mm-hmm. They always pull it out, but they're always that surprise element. The middle of the road is your ideal person, the sharpshooter as I call them, which is they know their deals, they know the process they're going through, they've confirmed timelines with their POC or their buyer, and generally they land within 5 or 10% of their forecast. And then you have the optimist, which is everything's going to be great. They hope and pray, and everything's going to come through, but they don't ask the right questions. They don't nail the process down. They don't check, all the steps they have to, and they're overcommitting until the last minute, and then every deal that they call falls out. This is a pretty common 3 personas I see. One of the things that we've implemented in our team is I have what I call the sharpshooter award. At the start of every month, we run monthly cycles. Every rep has to call their month on the 1st, and the person who comes within the closest to 100% of that number. It's got to be a reasonable number, of course. But the person that comes closest in each office gets a $100 spiff, just Venmo cash spiff, to encourage people to really hone in on their forecasting.
I like that. I've never heard of that, but I think that makes total sense. And it was interesting. I think there's a few reasons why people sandbag as well. One, it's like, I don't want to sabotage, but it also goes back to what you were mentioning earlier about these like constant flybys, right? If you're having to do that, I know personally like a ton of, enterprise reps who do that just so they don't have to deal with their executive, going, and they'll be like, yeah, I put it at 20K, even though I knew it was going to be, 500K, because as soon as it hits a threshold, then everyone is going to waste my time and I won't be able to get it done.
Yeah, especially if it's a bigger deal and they know it's one that we need for the quarter, you're going to get just all sorts of barraging, right? So.
Yeah, totally. All right. So next thing is what do we do about all of this? Paints this picture of a bit of doom and gloom in the forecasting world. But when you were experiencing these pains starting at TrendKite, what steps did you then take to build your new forecasting approach, which we'll go over now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have these 5 pillars that, when I was looking at redoing it, I started actually trying to build it myself because, I had a programming background. So I spent about 3 or 4 months building out macros and messing around. And I kept finding that we were still having the same problems, and trying to build it in a model-based approach just wasn't working. And these are the key things that I found that I really needed to go solve for, which is first and foremost, it needs to be connected, meaning that it's feeding straight off of Salesforce all the time. It doesn't need to be manually entered into a spreadsheet somewhere else. I mean, if something updates, a contract comes in, a deal falls out, whatever the situation is, as soon as you open that sheet, whether you're using Google or Office 365, Excel, you open that thing up and it's active and real. So that's probably the first key tenet, so that you're not always stale. Intelligent in that it adapts to the seasonality. So obviously teams have, or different companies have, seasonality by month, by quarter. But then going to the rep level, what we just talked about with the 3 types of personas, there's a natural handicapping you have to have based on the individual person's behavior. So you have to model the sandbagger versus the optimist, and the platform or whatever model you're using has to take into account the fact that not every person's 75% in contract is a consistent stage. So that's where I say intelligent. Obviously efficient, meaning no shadow reports. I get really freaked out when I see my managers have their own forecast spreadsheet that's separate from the main one, and they're copying, pasting cells, and then it's just so prone for error. Not to mention when you go to do pipeline reviews, everyone's scrambling around with spreadsheets. So literally a system of record that is live, so that it's easy to do pipeline reviews. And for me or any of the management team, I can walk the entire deal pipeline in a 45-minute session at night while I'm maybe sipping a glass of wine after late in the evening, so that as I go into the next day, I know where I stand and I know what we have left to do, right? And then fourth one for me is informative. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the majority of these spreadsheets are informative only upwards to the executive team. A good forecasting engine should be informative to the rep to let them know where they're falling behind on deals, so that they haven't stayed up on a deal, or the behavior of that deal is not indicative of one that would close. They should be alerted to that so they can take action on it, versus just having to answer those questions that come up from the manager all the time. And then obviously, first and foremost, we get paid on how we hit our numbers, so reliability is key. It has to be accurate, and it should be, like I take pride in us calling our number in the last 4 or 5 days within single-digit percentages. That's what you want to strive for, in my opinion. Especially we're a public company now, so it's really important that it's accurate.
Oh yeah, whole new ball game once you go public. The stakes are higher for sure.
Yeah,
So I want to unpack this a little bit. There's so much here, and it's such great information. So when we're talking about number one, connected, just to dive into that we're talking about like a two-way sync from wherever you're storing it to your CRM. Is that what we're talking about?
I actually look at this as, I think that the CRM should always be the system of record. So I feel like taking data out of, let's say, Salesforce, if that's what you're using, which most people do, I think that's where you go wrong. Right. You want the reps to continue to maintain their data where it is. And if you're using some other, let's say, spreadsheet or system, whatever, that it's persisting back to the holy grail of Salesforce, right? Because that needs to be where everything stores, right? Especially if you're using field level tracking, so you can see when things changed using the audits in Salesforce.
Yeah, agreed. Where I've seen that fall down sometimes, and it almost takes a little bit of maybe internal propaganda to your exec team, is I've found in past roles, some executives were like, no, I want this nice roll up in this way because I like to digest it this way, which can happen. But I guess if you show them why it needs to all be connected, and you can be more accurate, then
that's right. Yeah, and if you give them the right views with different tools or access, you can satisfy them. One of my big rules of thumb is don't give them all the detail at the deal level. They don't need that. I mean, it should roll up at manager, director, office, whatever. I roll it up at office level, but rolling it up at the level they need, just keep them out of the weeds of your deals. That's your job, right?
Yeah, smart. Yeah, I like that. And then the next one is so this intelligence, which I agree. I'm curious to see how deep you're going with this intelligence piece. Are you doing it on an individual rep level? Like you're like, hey, I know Bob. He's always in the sharpshooter, so I'm going to give him more accuracy. And then Phyllis maybe is more on the sandbagger. And then are you weighting them differently? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. So this is where I was trying to build it myself as a modeled platform. And, it was really hard. We couldn't do it very easily because you have to maintain essentially the regressive analysis of how has a rep performed. And that's a pretty complicated thing to do, which is what drove us to go look for product and market. So we ended up, deploying Clary for this reason, because it tracks the rep, the team, and the whole organization, and does that modeling for us so that we can actually see, how has Bob historically performed versus Sally versus John. And, for all the deals that are in their different stages, what has been their historic conversion to close, and having that at the person level and then rolling it up to the team and then rolling it up to the office, it's really powerful.
Yeah. I can imagine the power of that, and I foresee a world that I don't know if you guys already do this, but like even going deeper than that and being like, hey, Bob in X industry performs this well, or Bob against X title performs this well, which will be cool once we get there. And then this other one, no shadow reports, super, super important. So you've always got the one kind of master system of record. And then this last one, I'd love to dive, or not the last one, number 4, a little bit more into this informative, because I think this is really one of the most important on here, because this actually allows you, like I said earlier, to be proactive, to see the deals before you're in that like, oh shit kind of moment with the deals. Can you walk me through kind of what that looks like and how it allows reps to kind of self-diagnose?
So 2 things about this that I found. One is that the deal should have a deal likelihood probability score, like probability to close score, so that the reps know, are they seeing a deal that's really going to happen, or are they dreaming about a deal that's not going to happen? And so the platform that we chose actually does predictive analysis of the deal based on how the activity for that deal compares to other deals that have closed in the past. So that gives them a sense of, accuracy of their own predictions, right? And that's how you help to close the handicap between the sandbagger and the sharpshooter and the optimist, is having that system tell them how good of a likelihood this deal is to close, based on the activity that's happening on that deal compared to all other deals that have historically closed for the company, right? So that gives them a good sense, but then also having a view into the activity level on the deal on a time basis, so they can see if they're forgetting about or not following up enough. Our system has, a Gantt view that shows time, and then has little bubbles that show emails, phone calls, documents, meetings over time. And when I look at a deal with a rep on a one-on-one, and they've got it marked to close, and I know it's not going to close, I pull up that Gantt chart and I just show them, here's 2 other deals you closed. Look at all the activity, the meetings, the interactions you had, the activity that was going on. Look at this deal. They've been talking to us every 4 days. There's just not enough frequency of engagement to show that this is going to close. And teaching them how to gauge their own calls, right? And as I look at the month-to-month sharpshooter call that we do, as people become more and more in tune with reading into the signals they get from the forecast, they improve that score, and they get higher to 100% reliability. That makes forecasting helpful for them, not just this tool that goes up to the C-suite, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I love the ability to kind of visualize when I look at my own personal past deals in the past and stuff. It was always looking for those patterns, and when you can actually visualize it, especially on a graph or something, much easier to pull up those patterns. That's awesome. Okay, let's see. Q&A time. All right, we got some good questions throughout. So we've probably got about 10, 15 minutes or so for questions. So number one is Louise. Louise, thank you for the question. First question, he's got 3 questions actually. Louise, jumping the gun here. I love it. A is, how can I get the PowerPoint? We will send it out. You can also find it on the Sales Hacker SlideShare. And then his next kind of 2-part question is, who is in charge of the forecast? Should it be sales? Should it be marketing? And then his anecdote is, I think the forecast has to be the company's responsibility, not just sales. And wants to know your thoughts on that.
So I want to make sure we delineate the forecast from the plan. So the plan the plan of record, the revenue plan, new bookings plan, if you will, I see that as something that the company works on together, marketing, sales, right, as part of annual planning, because everyone's got to get all in about what they're going to put in resource-wise to make sure that plan happens. But once the plan is solidified and you're going into the quarter or the year or whatever it is, driving the plan and owning the forecast of how you achieve that plan, that belongs with the sales team. Obviously, everyone has their responsibility to support that plan, marketing with the leads that they're supposed to drive, anyone else, event marketing with webinars or whatever. But at the end of the day, from my point of view, the forecast should be owned by the sales team. And it goes down to the individual contributor and all the way up, right? If you're using a tool like a system like we've talked about here, it goes down to every individual just doing their job and keeping their data updated, and the managers staying on them and just propagating it up. It shouldn't have to be a heroic effort every week to update the forecast. But again, I see it as it's our number. We're on the hook. We got to go chase the deals down. We should be calling the number.
Yeah, totally. I would agree with everything you said there. Here's another really great question, actually. This is from Anna. Anna, thank you so much for the question. This is kind of a classic question. How have you justified the ROI to your leadership to invest in such a platform? And it says, ideally, it's not just a productivity play for the leadership.
Yeah, I mean, so there's 2 ways I approached justifying it. One was around just time that managers can spend working deals and efficiency of one-on-ones. So you take the average sales team, 8 reps to a manager. If the rep is doing 30-minute one-on-ones every week that turn into 45-minute one-on-ones because they're going through every deal in the minute level of detail, the interrogation of deals, right? That's 15 extra minutes per one-on-one, so that's like 2 hours off the floor additional every week that they could be working deals, supporting their reps, joining demos, whatever the other, contributing factors they could be doing. So, you look at my team, I've got, 10 new business managers and then several other, actually 12, including one of the other teams. But you take 12 managers, 2 hours a week, that's 24 hours a week on their salary. it doesn't take but about 2 months to pay for the tool. If you're a smaller organization, the rationalization can be just time saved. As I see a lot of small companies, every week the CFO or someone in the executive operations office is in a forecast meeting with the head of sales and many of the members, and they're all, dealing with spreadsheets, pulling reports, screwing around with stuff. Those inefficiencies can be paid for very easily, especially when you look at, C-suite salaries, spending, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on a system that can help you be more efficient. It easily pays for itself, especially if you can predict the deals that are not going to happen and go save them before they fall off the forecast.
Yeah, absolutely. That, again, going back to being able to be more prescriptive with deals, you can save a bunch of ones that, may not have come through. And then also another point there, just to add on top of everything that you said, maybe it's something you pitch to your board. Like, I don't think you could have any board that wouldn't, if you told them, hey, we can make our forecasting X amount more accurate, then they'll put some pressure on the leadership for sure. Yeah,
no, absolutely. It wasn't a hard sell for me. I mean, I'm happy to take everyone through, offline. I can provide my contact details, how we did it. It really comes down to just efficiency. And do you want your sellers and your seller managers sitting behind spreadsheets or in conference rooms debating numbers, or do you want them on the phone talking to customers and closing business? It's a pretty simple question.
Totally. And another great question here from Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much for the question, and thank you all for some really good engagement here. So this is another great question. So to what degree of detail, in your eyes, should a manager know the status of each of their reps' deals?
So I think it comes down to defining really good staging. So what we've done is we have our stages, they go 25, 50, 75, 90, 100. They have names with each of them. And we've defined the criterion that must be met to move through each of the stages. And if you teach that, you instill that discipline, and you ensure that the reps are logging the corresponding activity that took place to justify the move, and you do a deep inspection periodically on it just to make them know that you're checking, they will learn the behavior. You shouldn't have to micro detail every single task, or every single task on every single deal. That being said, if you also have a platform like this, if you go back one screen, you can see maybe one of the visuals that we have that show the activity view on our deals. So that top right is our Gantt activity. You can see different activities that are going on between you and the client. If reps are trying to pull the wool over your eyes, if you will, and you've got this visibility into the deal, you can get a sense of whether or not they're progressing something outside the bounds of the agreed upon tasks to move it to, say, commit or to a forecast, whatever your categories are, and then you dig into it. I mean, I have this view. I scan through. We typically have 200 to 300 deals in our pipeline every month, and going into the last week of the month, I will work my way through every single deal, comparing the activity level on it to the staging to make sure that it's legit. And I'll ask the managers to go drill down where I feel like the staging is not consistent with the activity on the account. But if you shouldn't have to helicopter parent, as I call it, the reps, if the stages are well defined and you have an ability to see conformance from something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is there anything else I somehow skip aside? Anything else that you want to call out on this slide here? Because it looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think for us, the benefits that we've had from deploying this approach is we've got great insight into opportunities, knowing whether they're really moving along versus the optimistic perspective that an optimistic seller might have. We now have a deal score that tells us the likelihood of a deal to close. It's actually that score in the top right. So this particular deal is not going to close at a 28. But sorry, it's hard to see a little bit font. But our scores, if it hits about 85 or higher, it's pretty much a dead ringer to close. And then the other part of this is just giving the managers the ability to dig in without having to go do the 12-question helicopter parenting flyby, And instead, they just find the ops that are problematic and then engage the rep and go, hey, I see that opportunity with Acme Inc. You've got it in your forecast, but they haven't replied in 7 days. Let's brainstorm a strategy of how we get them to re-engage. Maybe we send them Tiff Treats cookies, or we FedEx them a book, whatever your strategy is. But that sort of proactive coaching and helping versus the daily rigmarole of, okay, where is it at? Where is it at? What's your next step? That just becomes so tiring. And then obviously, making forecasting less time wasteful. I mean, this should allow you to spend more time working on the deals and less time putting numbers into a spreadsheet, which we all hate to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So going back to some of the questions here, and a lot of people are asking similar question, which is, what is the software? So this is Clary that we're looking at in this right here. Right. Someone asked what CRM package you're using. It's Salesforce with Clary on top. Is that correct?
Correct. That's right.
Awesome. And again, people asking to send this presentation. It's coming. Okay. Don't you worry. And here's a good one from Grove Scruggs. Grove, thanks for the question. This could be probably another topic on a whole other webinar. It's a difficult question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. So anything that you've learned about good versus bad reps in terms of how they manage their time to successfully achieve their number? What is the optimal split of time allocation?
In terms of time on different tasks, or?
Yeah, so it is a little bit vague. What is optimal split of time allocation? I'm thinking on tasks. I think to make it more relevant to this discussion, maybe talk about what's their time spent on, like as an individual contributor, spent on going over deals, forecasting versus actually being in meetings and
so I think generically I try to avoid in my team talking about the minute tasks like dials and emails as much as I hate, you have to do it. I try to avoid it. I like to focus on outcomes. So the demos that were set, demos that were run, deals that were moved down the funnel. The way we do it, every Thursday, our team runs this thing which we call deals to move, which is part of our forecasting process. So what deals are you going to move in the next 7 days from pipeline to forecast to best case to commit. And then from that, it bubbles out all the activities that you need to go do relative to each of those deals, right? And that's where the one-on-one with your manager comes in. So we leverage, the platform to do this. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be relative to each individual's conversion ratio. So on our floor, some people take 60 activities to set a demo. Some people can do it in 10 because they're just so personalized. So to a degree, you have to tailor it to the individual rep's efficiency. We have reps that will spend 45 minutes sitting research and LinkedIn digging to write the perfect email to get a demo, and they'll get it 1 for 1. And then you have others who will send 50 emails that are super light, personalized to get a demo. So I think to answer that question, you have to look at the individual's performance on how they approach prospecting and how their conversion from demos to pipeline works, or demos to pipeline ops work, to kind of rationalize the time. Because I don't think my opinion is there's no formula that's unique, that's prescriptive across all reps. It has to be unique to each individual seller's abilities.
Yeah, I would strongly agree with that for sure. Definitely no silver bullets. You can't blanket the whole team. I think you got to build off of the strengths of each individual and kind of double down on those.
Having a tool where you can see the funnel metrics for each person to know what their activities look like to get to a deal allows you to sort of go back and reverse engineer that split of time for each person based on their performance historically. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, one more question, and then I'll let you off the hook here, but this is a good one. This is from Chatyana. Chatyana, thanks for the question. Chatyana is the national sales head with Jim Shim, and she runs a team of 13 BDRs and 3 account managers. Her business is completely driven by pull sales, so I believe she's talking about like an outbound model, and it gets very difficult to predict the revenue as the site putting in all the effort. The closure takes time, because of which predicting the revenue becomes very difficult. What approach should I take to forecast the revenue? So basically, I think if I can summarize that, it's all 100% outbound, and she's having trouble predicting it. So what approach?
So we're the same model. We have 2 SDRs to every 3 reps. We're all outbound. Our sales cycle is roughly 45 days. Our larger deals tend to be about 90. But I think this goes back to studying this time and stage. So you want to look at how much time deals spend in each stage before they close. And when you see that deals are in a particular stage for too long versus the norm, you know that a deal is stuck or in trouble. And that's one of the biggest ways to solve that problem is if you go back and look at all the deals that you've closed, look at the time they took to close, inception of the BDR demo through the close, and how much time they spent in each phase. So the prospecting phase, the demoing phase, the proposing phase, you might have different phases, but the negotiation, et cetera. So model out the right, kind of the mean time and stage for your average deal, and then look at deals that are falling outside of that. And those are the deals you need to go in and interrogate with the rep and go, why is this stuck in negotiations for 14 days? Our average negotiation cycle is 10 days, and go in and help them along. A lot of times what I find with this is that's usually when something is in a stage longer than it should be, the rep is either unable to handle an objection or an issue that they have, or they're waiting forever for someone in legal on the other side to come back to them, and they're afraid to poke and ask for red lines or feedback. That's often when I will get involved, or my manager will get involved, or director will jump in and try and poke the procurement person or whomever, the buyer, to kind of move things along. So know what your time and stage should be and model against it. And when things move out of the normal range for time in a particular stage, top of funnel, bottom of funnel, whatever, that's when you need to jump in as a leader and interrogate that deal and help the seller move it along.
That's awesome. That's great advice. I think, so many people do look at the average deal length, but just as a whole, and they're not, you don't see too often people, breaking up by stage and being really prescriptive that way. So that's awesome. All right. Well, Kevin, that takes us to our time. Thank you so much, man. That was a lot of fun. You're an absolute wealth of knowledge, and to the community we had so many great, thoughtful questions. Thanks for hanging out with us, and go out there and create some pipeline and close some deals.